It was a different essential service provided by the Santa Barbara Airport, however, that still fills the citizens of Santa Barbara with pride and a sense of life-saving accomplishment.
Every morning during the fire season, when we had an active blaze, we would meet, myself, my staff would meet with the chief pilots and the staff personnel at the tanker base and go over what the fire plan was, how we were going to provide services, the runways that we were going to utilize, the times to the fire burns, the weather.
We had the C-130s, we had the P-2Vs, SP-2Hs, DC-4s, DC-6s, DC-7s, and we had the P-3s.
It's been primarily used, even from its inception, as an initial attack, where you can get something to a fire, that either water, retardant, whatever product, to the fire, make some drops, keep it small, get the ground troops there, and put it out.
The visitor center was on the left-hand side, and that place used to get packed. What they would see is a parking tender coming out and marshaling the aircraft and parking it, and then the retardant crew go in with the loading hose, hook up. Took anywhere from about 6 minutes to 10 minutes, and then you'd see the crew shut the plane back up, and they'd start to, the marshaller would get them the okay to start once everybody was clear from the plane, and then marshal them back out to the taxiway.
20, 30 air tankers dispersed all over the airport, waiting to go in to be refueled and to be loaded on with retardant. And off they'd go, and several of the fires right around the foothills here, they would be gone for 4 minutes and come back and land and load up again.
We'd listen to where it was, depending whether it was on the forest or whether it was the county, and then start to get the lat and long, and then you need to get your radio frequencies. Are there any, hazards in the area, low, wires? Or is it an active military route? So there's a lot of things that go into a dispatch, before they just fly out the door. You'll see the retardant, it's colored red, and that's why, so they can see where they're dropping. You knew people that worked out on the ramp because usually they had red shoes.
The Forest Service had bleachers out there at the fueling point or the loading point. And you'd sit there and they'd have charts out where the fire was and what the activity, and you sit there and watch all day long if you wanted to. And that was one of my favorite activities because I came over here, kids would come with me and we'd watch.
We had 13 air tankers there at any given time. They were all large air tankers, so it was pretty much non-stop all day from sun up to sundown.
When I was working at Santa Barbara Aviation, we'd work till 5 o'clock, and in the evening, when the Boreate bombers finally shut down, when it got dark, Charlie Oliver and I would go down there and work on the airplanes till midnight to get them, if they had squawks and things that needed to be fixed so they could fly the next day.
57-pound bags sliding across that little blade there. And you would slice it in half, open the bag up, dust everywhere. Nothing like we would do nowadays. We don't have dust nowadays. Okay, so, but in one day on the Romero fire, we did 159,000 gallons, and nothing ever stopped for 14 hours that day.
I think that fire went for almost 10 days, and I was beat, working from about 5 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the morning till about 11 o'clock at night. And we lived probably about 45 minutes away, so little sleep, long durations, and I think, what did he tell me? I look like I have been rode hard and put away wet. I'm all...
The one time when California was burning practically, and then there was a time the C-130 from Dover, Delaware had to bring us retardant all the way from there because couldn't factory couldn't keep up with it. It was that was a bad year, really bad year.
Several times we had to suspend operations other than the essential operations. Medevac flights naturally were permitted and encouraged to go and so forth. But yeah, there were times when we would have to delay air carriers coming into the airport. There were times that military would have to divert that someplace else. And the primary thrust was that the air tankers had priority other than an actual emergency, and we were going to do everything possible for that particular effort.
The pilots were pretty good, you know, when they go turn around, because they used to come in straight to the air base, and then as they did a tight turn out, you know, the captain would actually be looking towards the visitor center, and most of the pilots, you know, would wave, you know, and especially if the kids were out there.
They don't necessarily do it for the money. They're paid well, but you're not going to get rich by it. You're not going to, you know, and they love the flying. I don't know any of them that don't love the flying.
I got to know a lot of the pilots, highly educated, highly motivated, really committed individuals to their profession. And it is a profession. It used to be years ago like they were cowboys and cowgirls. No way. These people are the epitome of professionalism.
And there's not a pilot that didn't love what they do, you know. That's why they do it. We had a lot of flights that used to come in, you know, not just when we were running air tankers, but you got to think you also had the commercial aircraft coming in too. And so, you know, we used to go up and visit the tower and thank the controllers because they really worked hard to keep that flow, but yet keep the air tankers and allow them to get in and expedite them getting in and getting out.
The Forest Service is, to me, one of the least appreciated organizations of the Federal Service. The people that staffed this Forest Service station through thick and thin, through adverse weather, fires, firestorms, and so forth, we all owe a vote of gratitude.
Once we had one of the old PB4Ys come in and one of their front tires had blown out, went flat, so it was kind of stuck out there on the runway, you know, and as I said, we had good working relationships then, and I think it was Signature, it might have been Signature that was still there, but boy, they came with their pulley for the aircraft, tugged it on, we got it pulled off, and I think we did that like within a half hour, just kept things still going. The Santa Barbara foothills, obviously, they're known for their sundowner winds, and you get those east winds. When you get those gusts, it can also, you know, cause sometimes some downdrafts. Some of the pilots would complain, man, you know, they hit some downdrafts and it shook the plane, you know, or then, you know, pretty hard. And so, obviously, when they're hitting those kind of conditions or multiple conditions, sometimes, you know, they would be flying and there's thunderstorms or, you know, it's there was lightning around. Well, obviously it's not that safe of a condition, so we bring them in. I mean, obviously everybody wants to come home.
Yeah, you get downdrafts, you get all that. You drop a few hundred feet in a second, and you know, you hit dead air. There's nothing there. You know, there's no lift on the wings and stuff like that. Stories abound with that.
There was a few times one of the pilots would come in. Once one pilot called it, that was it. It just took one pilot, and maybe some of the others may not have thought it was so bad, but it just took one pilot, and then I say, nope, that's it. You know, if someone's getting some hard downdrafts, then it's time to call it. You know, you never left until you knew the aircraft were all safe down on the ground, or they weren't coming home, and so, you know, it'd be, you know, 7 o'clock, you'd call up to the tanker base where they're working, if they were working in the area where they could fly back home, and they'd either say, yeah, they're coming back home. So you'd have to wait until they got back home, which would be dusk.
Sometimes they don't come back. There have been, I would have to look it up. I have the stats, but I don't remember them. I try not to. There have been a lot of losses and a lot of good friends of mine, pilots and co-pilots, that don't come back. Several of them out of Santa Barbara.
I don't think any pilot is ever going to think that it's going to happen to them, one of those accidents. And, for the most part, they have like a checklist that they go through, and sometimes, accidents happen. It's obviously, it is, I think, considered, a high-risk job. I mean, now you look at it, for a while there, we were losing a tanker every year.
A lot of the co-pilots were really young guys and just trying to make it in the field. But if you think about those numbers, it's very few, and there's a goodly number of them that are not around anymore. They died on missions. They crashed for one reason or another. It could be mechanical, it could be pilot error, it could be any of those things. Most cases when an accident or an incident occurs where there's a fatality, the agencies take it on themselves to do a stand down. So that means, and that's nationwide stand down, all aircraft are stood down at least for that afternoon and maybe into the next day. And so in some ways that helps. When they happened here, we would do, within a couple of weeks, there would be a memorial service at the base out here in Santa Barbara, and I don't know if they're still there, because I haven't been out to that location where we used to be. But we had a lawn in back of the building, and we actually had 4 trees planted there, named for each one of the pilots.
In 2007, the air tanker base, which had provided strategic firefighting capabilities for 44 years, moved to Santa Maria. For many years, the Santa Barbara Airport Terminal, built by United Airlines in the 1940s, was a refreshing surprise for travelers coming to Santa Barbara for the first time.
I used to get a kick when I was flying in myself at the old terminal. It was fun to watch people get off an airplane and they'd be telling their seatmate, have you ever been to Santa Barbara? No. Oh, you're going to love this terminal. Well, there wasn't much to love functionally, but it was such a beautiful thing.
The old terminal was just wonderful, and it was, it was so different from just about anything you would see, even, with other medium-sized cities like Santa Barbara. Not only, beautiful architecture, but also just, very homey and laid back, and I remember it as being, always a fun place to go, whether I was flying or whether people were coming in.
In 1951, or close to the time that picture of me was taken, we had 13,000 passengers in a year go through that terminal. And with minor modifications that happened in 1976, I think, they did 225,000 people in a year. And in 1997, without modifying it again, we had 845,000 people go through the terminal. So you can see there was a need.
When I first came to the airport in the mid-1980s, the previous director had been trying for some years to get approved safety areas at each end of our main runway. And there were many environmental issues, as you can imagine, because the airport is co-located with the Goleta Slough. The airport had not been successful in getting support for that project, nor getting that project approved. The FAA requires safety areas at each end of the runway. During our master plan in the late 1990s, we worked with the environmental community and were successful getting support not only for the runway safety area project, but mitigation in the slough to restore wetlands. So it was a win-win for both safety, passenger safety, as well as the environment. So we constructed the project. We moved Tecolotido Creek and revegetated it with wetland plants, as well as created many acres of wetlands and restored it in the Goleta Slough.
Basically, we are running an airport that's under the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission and in a wetland. And one thing you can do if you want to make a change is you have to rebuild some of the wetlands that have been destroyed. And the real background is that when the Marine Corps arose here for World War II, they just mowed the thing down. It doesn't look anything like it. There used to be a mountain out here that's gone that became the airport. So it required some careful work to bring some of it back. I remember one of the early meetings we had with the Coastal Commission about that, and someone was complaining about relocating one of the creeks. And we had a slide that we put up and pointed out that the creek was all in straight lines and made 90-degree corners, because that's the way the Marines reconfigured it. And this wasn't something that occurred in nature.
To kind of join the old and the new, there'll be a courtyard between the old terminal and the new with a fountain and some landscaping. Probably the size of the courtyard will be about the size of in the El Paseo complex is a small courtyard, and it's kind of a similar size for this one. And I think that will be nice for people that when they're waiting for family or friends, you know, they can kind of sit around and enjoy the weather. And also in the old building, or the historic building, we'll have our security operations center and our parking office, and then the base of the tower will be a small history display.
Just as the new terminal has incorporated much of Santa Barbara's aviation history, it also provides a chance, through its design and character, to capture and reconnect passengers to the things that make the experience of flying unique and special, and also a chance to pay homage to the pioneers whose bravery, foolhardiness, intelligence, and creativity helped shape our world of flight.
I think my favorite days would be when someone soloed the first time, because you kind of relive your own first solo, and then to be able to cut the tradition is after they've soloed safely and they come back in, they're all excited because it's a big day. They say you remember your first solo as well as you remember the day you got married. I remember my solo, but I don't remember when I got married.
I think aviation is unique in a way that it's a family endeavor. People work together, they joke, they have disagreements, but there is always the purpose of safety comes first. And I think when there is an accident, there is a sense of loss of a family member. And you can sense it in the tower. You can sense it from other air traffic controllers that sort of circle the wagons and are there to provide support and strength to get through whatever the incident is.
We were starting to move fast. We went well over flap speed. And it got up to a certain speed, and the flaps caused a turbulence over the tail so that we could no longer control the airplane. The nose simply dropped. And we were looking straight down at these birds that were starting to scatter because they could see us coming. They were smart, we weren't. Conroy put the thing into what they call beta, which flattened the propeller out. And the airplane just came to a stop in the air. And then as soon as the speed dropped, we were able to pull out of the thing. And he was shaking. He didn't say a word and I didn't say a word. Then he turned to me and he says, something like that'll start your heart.
Dreamers. I wish I could have, or I wish I could. I think everyone would probably like to learn to fly, but to the average person, they think, oh, it's too hard. It's too expensive, that's for sure. Very expensive. But I always say that if it's something you really, really want, you'll find a way. I don't know. There's something about flying by yourself that, I don't know, it's a freedom that you don't have any other time. I loved looking at clouds and being close to them and looking down at things and seeing all the beautiful things that are there. It gives you a totally different perspective of the world.